The swing beneath the oak tree hung perfectly still. Its ropes were frayed, the wooden seat bleached gray by sun and rain, splintered with cracks that mirrored the parched earth below. Eleanor's husband had built it for their son, a promise of endless summers. Now it just hung there, a silent testament to promises broken by time and tragedy. To Eleanor, it was more than a memory. It was the landmark where her life had truly come to a stop. The screen door groaned shut behind Eleanor Vance as she stepped onto the porch, a mug of cold coffee in her hand. It was a ritual, as mechanical as breathing. Each morning, she took her seat in the armchair to face the ruin she had allowed to claim the land. Her gaze drifted over fields that had surrendered to dust and thistle, where life had once been a thick and stubborn thing. Farther on, the great barn sagged in the middle, its spine seemingly broken by a harsh winter. She no longer felt sorrow looking at it. Sorrow required energy, and Eleanor's reserves had run dry long ago. Now there was only a hollow familiarity, a quiet acceptance that all things, from timber to hope, eventually turned to rot. She took a sip of the coffee, its bitterness meaningless, and continued her watch over her kingdom of decay. But then, something did appear. At first, it was just a smudge against the heat shimmer rising from the dirt track. A tiny movement, almost imperceptible in the vast stillness of the landscape. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. They had grown used to looking at nothing, but this movement, however small, snagged her attention. It was two alone. Slowly, the smudge took on a form, impossibly small, stick-thin, and moving with a hesitation that spoke of long miles. It didn't walk with the confidence of someone with a clear destination, nor with the furtiveness of a vagrant. It simply moved forward, one heavy footstep after another. The figure stopped at the gate, the one with the broken latch Eleanor hadn't bothered to fix, and just stood there, making no sound. It didn't call out, didn't wave, didn't try to draw attention. It just stood at the border between the outside world and her dead land, a silent and patient presence. From the porch, Eleanor could see more clearly. It was a boy. A whisper of a child, maybe 12 or 13 years old. A threadbare shirt, too large for his bony shoulders, hung on him like a sack. He clutched the strap of a canvas satchel as if it were the only anchor he had in the world. It was his eyes, even from that distance, that held her. They weren't pleading. They weren't demanding. They were just watching, waiting, possessing a stillness that felt far older than his years. A familiar instinct, cold and sharp, told Eleanor to stand up, walk inside, and bolt the door. It was the simplest thing to do. It was what she always did. Peddlers and men looking for work had come by before, their needs loud and urgent. They were easy to ignore. This was different. This silence was a question, and for the first time in a long time, Eleanor didn't have a ready answer. The groan of her own armchair as she shifted her weight sounded like a cannon shot in the quiet. Her feet, clad in worn leather boots, found the porch steps before her mind had fully consented. Each step on the brittle sun-scorched grass was a conscious act, a journey across a divide she had spent 3 years building. She stopped a few feet from the gate, the rusted wire a tangible line between her world and his. The boy didn't flinch. He just watched her arrive, his gaze direct and unnervingly steady. "What do you want?" Her voice was hoarse, an instrument unaccustomed to use. It sounded more like a challenge than a question. The boy's voice was raspy from thirst and disuse, but the words were clear. "Heard you might need a hand." He didn't mention food or water. He didn't ask for pity. He offered a transaction, a proposal of work, as if he were a grown man come to bargain. Eleanor studied him. Up close, she could see the grime caked in the lines of his face, a map of dust and exhaustion. But his eyes, they met hers without a flicker of fear. Most folks in the county couldn't look her in the eye anymore. They saw the widow, the hermit, the woman who had turned bitterness into a shield. They saw a ghost. This boy saw her as if she were simply a person standing there, something twisted deep in her gut, a knot she thought had dissolved years ago. It was a dangerous feeling, something that felt like interest. She told herself it was just for a drink of water, just enough to send him on his way without the guilt of watching a child perish in the sun. It was a logical reason, a safe one. Her hand, stiff from disuse, fumbled with the broken latch. The gate groaned open on its single good hinge, the sound a complaint against the changed dot as the boy stepped onto her land. She noticed it, a slight drag in his left leg, a hitch in his gait that he tried to hide but couldn't. He'd walked for days, he'd said, with that leg. The simple fact landed a heavy blow against her carefully constructed apathy. He offered no name, and she didn't ask for one. Names belonged to people with pasts they were willing to share. People who came to her gate rarely did. She turned and walked toward the house, acutely aware of the soft, uneven footsteps following behind her, a sound that didn't belong, a sound that had already changed everything. The front door shrieked in protest as she pushed it open. The air inside was stale and cool, thick with the scent of disuse. A fine layer of dust coated everything, a soft gray blanket over a life put to sleep. For the first time in years, Eleanor saw it all as if through another's eyes. The cold, empty hearth, the furniture huddled like silent mourners, the way the light from the window illuminated dancing particles of dust. A hot flush of shame, a foreign feeling, crept up her neck. She did not welcome it. Without a word, she moved to the kitchen. She pulled a loaf of bread from the box a day past its prime, but still good, and found the last jar of peach preserves from a summer she'd tried to forget. The water from the well pump was mercifully cold and clean. Some things, it seemed, refused to die. She set a tin plate with 2 slices of bread and a cup of water before the boy. "Leo," he whispered as she set the plate down, as if the name were an offering in return. They ate in a silence that should have been awkward, but wasn't. It was a quiet born of mutual understanding, the kind shared by 2 people who knew the landscape of being alone. Leo ate slowly, deliberately, as if committing each bite to memory. Eleanor found herself eating too, not just to subsist, but actually tasting the sweetness of the peaches. When they were finished, Leo cleared his throat, the sound decisive in the quiet kitchen. "The barn," he said, his voice a little stronger. "Now, I've worked with stock before. Mind if I take a look? See what's what?" A laugh, dry and brittle as a dead leaf, almost escaped her lips. Everything needed fixing. But she just nodded and found herself following him back out into the stark sunlight, drawn by a curiosity she refused to name. He walked through the wreckage not with pity, but with the assessing eye of a builder. He pointed to a beam. That one solid oak, still true. He gestured to a wall. "This can be braced." Eleanor watched him, and she felt that dangerous thing stirring again, more insistent this time. It wasn't just interest. It was a flicker, faint and terrifying, of a future she had already buried. He was talking about her farm as if it still had a pulse. He was about to say more, but the words died on his lips. His head snapped up, his body going rigid. Then Eleanor heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the land's usual symphony of wind and rustling grass. It was the rhythmic pounding of hoofbeats, fast and heavy, coming up the road. Leo's face, already pale, turned the color of bone. He grabbed Eleanor's arm, his grip surprisingly strong, almost painful. "We have to hide," he whispered, his voice tight with a terror that was chillingly real now. Before she could process his words, he was pulling her toward a shadowed corner of the barn, behind a stack of rotting hay bales that smelled of damp earth and decay. Just then, 3 riders thundered into the yard, their horses churning up clouds of dust. Through the gaps in the barn's warped siding, Eleanor could see them clearly. They were hard men, their faces like currency worn smooth by hard use. The one in the lead, a tall man with a jawline like a hatchet and eyes that missed nothing, dismounted with a predatory grace. His name was Silas. He surveyed the property, his gaze lingering on the house, the open gate, and the footprints in the dust. He wasn't just looking, he was inventorying. "I know someone's here," Silas called out, his voice carrying a casual menace. Gates wide open. "We're looking for a boy." "Who are they?" Eleanor whispered, her breath catching. "My uncle," Leo breathed, trembling beside her. "He owed them when he couldn't pay. They wanted something else. They wanted me." The words landed on Eleanor not with fear, but with something else entirely. Eleanor felt something ignite in her chest, a cold fury that burned away the dust and cobwebs from the corners of her soul. The emotion was so clean and sharp it almost made her gasp. These men had come to her home, her sanctuary of decay, to hunt a child, to settle a debt that wasn't his. "Don't," Leo begged, his hand tightening on her arm. "Please, they're dangerous. I'll go with them. Don't let them hurt you." The boy was trying to protect her. That selflessness, in a world that only ever took, was the final spark. Eleanor was already moving. For 3 years, she had let life take everything from her. She had surrendered to grief, to time, to rust. She would not surrender to this. She pulled her arm free, gave the boy a look that silenced his protest, and stepped out of the darkness of the barn and into the harsh, unforgiving sunlight. The 3 men turned as one, their attention shifting from the silent house to the figure emerging from the barn. Silas's lips curled into a slow, mocking smile. He saw exactly what he expected to see, a woman worn down by time and hardship. Her face a roadmap of losses he couldn't care less about. An easy obstacle. "Well now," he said, his voice falsely sweet. "Looks like someone's home after all." "We're looking for a stray, ma'am." "About so high, dragging a bad leg. You wouldn't be hiding him, would you? It'd be better for everyone if you just send him on out." The sun was hot on her face. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird. In a cage, every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to apologize, to give them what they wanted. But then she thought of the boy, holding his breath in the darkness behind her. The boy with the old eyes and the broken gait. Her own voice, when it came, surprised her with its steadiness. "There's no boy here," she said, the words clean and simple. "Just me, and you're on my property." Silas's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold as a winter river. "I can smell a lie from a mile off, ma'am. Smells a lot like fear." He nodded to one of his men. "Check the barn." Eleanor didn't move to block him. She simply turned, her movements unhurried, and walked the few steps back to the house. Silas watched her, amused, as if this were some minor delay. He expected her to lock herself inside. She emerged a moment later. The thing in her hands was long, dark, and made of walnut stock and blued steel. Her husband's old rifle. She hadn't held it in years, but her hands remembered. The weight of it was familiar, solid, a terrible comfort. She didn't raise it to her shoulder. She didn't need to. She just held it, the barrel pointed toward the ground, but present. The man heading for the barn froze mid-step. Silas's smile finally vanished, replaced by a flat, dangerous watchfulness. "I said," Eleanor repeated, her voice perfectly level, now carrying across the dusty yard, "you're on my property, and I think it's time for you to leave." The yard was utterly still. The only sound was the wind, whispering through the broken slats of the barn, a neutral observer to the standoff. Eleanor watched Silas's eyes. She saw the calculation there, the weighing of risk against reward. He was looking for a crack in her resolve, a tremor in her hands, any sign that the woman holding the rifle was not the same one who had spoken. Fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But for the first time in years, it wasn't the only thing. it was accompanied by a powerful clarifying calm. This patch of dirt, this broken-down house, it was hers. The boy hiding in the barn, he was hers to protect. The realization was as solid and real as the walnut stalk in her hands. She had something to lose again. And it made her dangerous. Finally, after a silence that stretched for an eternity, Silas gave a curt, almost imperceptible shake of his head. He had come for an easy prize, not a gunfight with a woman who had nothing left to fear. He slowly backed away, never taking his eyes off her, and remounted his horse. "This isn't over," Silas said, his voice low and hard, no trace of the earlier mockery. "Debts have a way of being collected. One way or another." He cast a final venomous look toward the barn. "We'll be back." With a final violent churning of hooves, they were gone, leaving only a cloud of settling dust and a silence that felt heavier than before. Only when the sound of their horses had faded completely did Eleanor realize her hands were shaking. The rifle suddenly felt impossibly heavy. She lowered it, leaning against the doorframe, her legs feeling like water. The barn door creaked open, and Leo emerged, blinking in the sunlight. He stared at her, not at the rifle, but at her face. His own was a mixture of awe and a disbelief so profound it was almost painful. "Why?" he whispered, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. "You don't even know me. Why would you do that?" Eleanor looked at the boy, at the last standing pieces of her broken-down life, and found an answer that was truer than any she could have crafted. "I suppose," she said, her voice rough with emotion she didn't know she still possessed. "I was tired of letting things be taken from me.